Hebraisms in the Book of Mormon is truly one of the most enjoyable, exciting evidences for, at least, if nothing else, at least another cultural context that Joseph Smith himself did not possess or own.
So a Hebraism is a word that scholars use to describe a literary device or a linguistic element in the Book of Mormon that makes better sense in biblical Hebrew than it does in English. These, of course, are very exciting for us to discover because they provide evidence that, in fact, the Book of Mormon is a translated work, that it derives from a source that has connections with the ancient Near East, the world of the Bible.
There have been a great many Hebraisms found in the Book of Mormon. I'll point to one that happens to be one of my favorites, and that's what I call the if-and conditional sentence. In English, we never say, if you don't study hard and you will fail the test. If you go out on that ledge and you're going to fall off. We say if. Sometimes we say if then. If he doesn't come by 8 o'clock, then we'll know he's not coming at all. In biblical Hebrew, though, you often say if and. In the book of Genesis, I did a quick survey once, and I found 6 occurrences of the if and conditional sentence in the Hebrew of Genesis. It never shows up in English translations because it's bad English. In the original manuscript of the Book of Mormon, though, you get a cluster of if-and conditional sentences in Helaman, and you actually get it in the famous Promise of Moroni, in Moroni 10, 4 and 5. It's eventually taken out by Joseph Smith, presumably, because he reads it and thinks, this is not English. It's like no English that any English speaker has ever spoken, as far as we can tell. What it may be is, in effect, a kind of contamination from the original language into the English translation. Anybody who's translated a lot knows that happens. You start getting into the rhythm and the sentence structure of the original language, and pretty soon your English begins to sound vaguely German, or it'll take on a Spanish hue or something like that, and you have to go through and clean it up. It just happens. It's the way it occurs, and so I think that's what you may be seeing there, is the effect of an underlying Hebrew text upon the language of the original manuscript of the Book of Mormon.
In biblical Hebrew, relationships between two nouns are often created through what we refer to as a construct state. So two nouns are placed together where a preposition of is technically not necessary, although it's there from a literal perspective. So expressions in the Book of Mormon such as plates of brass, which would normally appear in English as brass plates, or river of water, which would, of course, in English appear as typically as simply a river or something of this sort. Some of these literary devices are reflected in the translation of the Book of Mormon. So a cognate accusative is a literary device that appears in the Hebrew Bible or the Old Testament. It's when an author uses the same word for both a verb and a direct object. Cognate means similar, and accusative refers to the direct object in a sentence. So, for example, Semitic authors will use a poetic literary phrase such as dreamed a dream. These sorts of things do appear in the Book of Mormon. There are many examples.
In the Book of Mormon, you have Lehi saying, behold, I have dreamed a dream, or in other words, I have seen a vision. The dreamed a dream is a really obvious cognate accusative. The seen a vision is a little less obvious, but I suspect in the original it was, I have seen a seeing. I have dreamed a dream, I have seen a seeing.
These are things that do appear in the Book of Mormon and suggest a connection with the Hebrew Bible.
That, I think, is what's going on there. It's a classic Arabic/Hebrew cognate accusative. It's possible that something like the cognate accusative crept in through that path. It's impossible, I think, for an if-and conditional sentence to have crept in that way because, as I've said, if-and conditional sentences are never translated in English as if-and conditional sentences. The King James translators systematically anglicized those conditional sentences, as any good translator would do, unless he gets caught up and simply over-literalizes his translation, which is, I think, what may have happened in the case of those passages in the Book of Mormon. You simply don't have a way of Joseph, who didn't read Hebrew, getting access to the patterns of Hebrew conditional sentences. There are other things that can't be explained, I think. The The question of chiasmus, for example.
Chiasmus is a style where you go through a list of terms in one order and then turn around and go through the same list in the opposite order. Chiasms can be found in lots of different literatures and languages, but it tends to be used the most extensively in Hebrew, and in the Old Testament in particular, where it has been studied far more extensively than in any other body of literature. One would have to think that if the Book of Mormon is, in fact, a record of ancient Israelites, it should have chiasmus in it. And indeed it does. Of the writers in the Book of Mormon who use chiasmus the best, such as Alma and King Benjamin, we find there some of the best examples of chiasmus anywhere in world literature.
A short chiasm is the kind of thing you might pick up from reading the Bible and having an ear for style. A long chiasm, like Alma 36, or even the entire book of 1 Nephi, is the kind of thing you just don't notice casually. And in fact, scholars didn't begin writing about chiasmus in the Book of Mormon until essentially too late for Joseph Smith ever to have noticed it.
Although the repetition doesn't work for us as Westerners, there was something about it that was quite pleasing to those people in the world of the Bible. And these same sorts of forms then appear all throughout the Book of Mormon: work a work, and dream to dream, and judge a righteous judgment, which of course suggests that there is a cultural, literary, and linguistic connection between the Book of Mormon and the Bible.